It was almost midnight, and the chaos of Lagos hadn't slowed for a second. The streets of Victoria Island were still packed with cars, yellow Danfos, local buses, and stubborn Okadas, motorbikes. In the heart of the city, where the sound of honking horns, the blaring of street vendors' radios, and the pulsating beats of Afrobeat music filled the air, Ayodele, or Ao as his friends called him, was finally getting a moment to himself. Ao was no stranger to Lagos' manic pace. Having grown up in the city, he'd learned early on that in Lagos, nothing stays quiet for long. The city lived and breathed through its people, its hustle, and its secrets. But tonight, the city felt different. The streets, though as busy as ever, seemed to be holding something back. A quiet tension that was unfamiliar, even in Lagos, where tension was the background noise. As Ao stepped out of his small apartment in Lekki, a popular area for young professionals like himself, the neon lights from nearby billboards flickered. The tall, glassy buildings that lined the streets were just silhouettes against the starless sky. His heart raced in anticipation. It wasn't often that Ao felt like something bigger was happening, but tonight, he felt it. A message pinged on his phone, a notification from an unknown number. "Meet me at the bridge. Midnight. The life you want is waiting." The message was simple, direct, and cryptic. His thumb hovered over the screen for a few seconds. Should he go? Who sent this message? And what did it mean? The bridge in question was the Lekki-Ikoyi Bridge, the iconic crossing that connected the affluent Lekki Peninsula to the Ikoyi neighborhood, home to some of the wealthiest people in Lagos. Ao's curiosity got the better of him. Life in Lagos was all about risks, he reminded himself. Whether it was chasing a new business deal or getting caught in a midnight traffic jam, everything in Lagos was unpredictable. After a few deep breaths, Ao grabbed his keys, locked his door, and made his way to his car. As he drove through the winding streets of Lekki, past the towering Eco Tower and the trendy cafes filled with fashionably dressed Lagosians, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was on the horizon, something that would change his life forever. The ride to the Lekki-Ikoyi Bridge was slow, as expected, thanks to the familiar Lagos traffic. As the car inched closer to his destination, Ao couldn't help but feel more nervous. His thoughts raced. Who was behind the message? What was waiting for him on the other side of the bridge? As he finally reached the bridge, the city lights reflected off the water below. The air was thick with humidity and the faint scent of salt from the nearby coast. The bridge itself was majestic, stretching out over the water with the shimmering skyline of Lagos in the distance. The soft hum of cars passing by was drowned out by the sudden silence that seemed to fall over the scene as Ao parked his car near the edge. He stepped out into the cool night air, scanning the area. No one. The bridge, usually bustling with traffic and movement, was eerily empty. The usual crowds of late-night joggers, street hawkers, and romantic couples by the water's edge were absent. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a woman, tall, with sharp features, and wearing an elegant black dress. Her presence was commanding, but there was something about her that seemed out of place, almost like she didn't belong in this chaotic city. "You came," she said, her voice low but clear. "I knew you would." Ao froze, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to hide the unease in his voice. The woman smiled faintly. "I'm Chika. I've been watching you, Ao. You have potential. But more importantly, you have questions. And tonight, I'm going to answer them." Ao felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't know what to make of this. "What are you talking about? Why did you send me that message?" Chika's eyes glinted in the dim light. "Because you, Ao, are about to learn about the real Lagos. The Lagos behind the glamour, behind the nightlife, and the riches. There's a world you don't know. A world that only a few are allowed to see. And you, Ao, are being chosen for it." Ao's heart raced. This was getting out of hand. "What are you talking about? What do you mean, chosen?" Chika walked closer to him, her gaze intense. Lagos is not just a city of lights and riches. It is a place full of secrets, a place where the bold rise, and the curious, well, they get to see things others can only dream of. Tonight you're going to see it for yourself. Before Ao could speak, she turned and walked to the edge of the bridge, her heels clicking against the stone pavement. The sounds of the city, the hum of the traffic, seemed to fade into the distance as she spoke, her voice carrying over the water. In Lagos, you're either in the game or you're being played. Tonight, Ao, you'll learn which one you are. Ao followed Chika as she led him off the bridge and into the shadows. They walked along a narrow path that ran parallel to the water until they came upon a hidden door in a wall. It was unmarked, inconspicuous, and blended perfectly with the surrounding buildings. Ao could hardly believe his eyes. There was no way anyone would guess what was behind this door. Chika glanced back at him. Welcome to the heart of Lagos. The door opened, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. Ao hesitated for a moment but followed her. As he stepped down, his pulse quickened. What had he gotten himself into? The staircase led to a dimly lit hallway, and the air inside was thick with a strange, almost magnetic energy. At the end of the hall was a large, ornate door. Chika pushed it open, and Ao found himself staring into a room that seemed like it belonged to another world. It was a massive underground club with velvet-lined walls, chandeliers, and a vibrant crowd of well-dressed individuals. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, cigars, and laughter. The music was a steady Afrobeat rhythm, and the lights pulsed in time with the beats. But what really stood out was the atmosphere. It wasn't like any club Ao had ever seen. This place wasn't just a nightclub. It was a secret society, a hidden world where the elite of Lagos came together, away from the public eye, to engage in everything from business deals to life-changing decisions. The city's most powerful figures mingled here, and only a select few were ever allowed to enter. Ao stood frozen, his eyes wide. What is this place? Chika smiled cryptically. This, Ao, is the real Lagos. The one that no one talks about. The one where decisions are made, and lives are changed. Where fortunes are made and lost. Where the hustlers meet the royalty. You've entered a world where everything is on the line. Ao's mind raced. What had he gotten into? The world he had always known, of 9-to-5 jobs, of meetings and startups, was a far cry from this life of wealth, power, and mystery. But something inside him felt alive. This was the moment he had been waiting for. In the heart of Lagos, where the lights never went out, and the city pulse never slowed, Ao realized he was standing on the brink of a world that only the bold ever got to see. The story continues with Ao's deeper involvement in the mystery, unveiling secrets, meeting more influential figures, and discovering the darker side of Lagos. Along the way, Ao learns that the line between ambition and danger is razor thin in this city, and sometimes, chasing the Lagos dream means facing the harshest realities. Would you like me to continue or expand on specific parts? I could continue developing Ao's journey in this captivating Lagos adventure. Ao stood at the entrance of the underground world of Lagos, his heart thumping in his chest. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the faint notes of sizzling suya, spicy grilled meat. The walls were adorned with rich, velvet drapes, and the low hum of conversation mixed with the pulse of Afrobeat music. For a moment, Ao felt like he had stepped into another dimension, a world far removed from the constant hustle of Lagos. This place was exclusive, an island in the middle of the chaotic city. Only a select few were invited to enter this realm of elite power brokers, business moguls, and even politicians who made deals in the shadows. Chika led him deeper into the club, and the beat of the music became louder, as though it was beating in time with his own pulse. She didn't look back at him, but Ao could tell she was well acquainted with the space. The way people greeted her, some with smiles, others with subtle nods, spoke of her status. They finally reached a private booth in the back corner. It was partially hidden by thick curtains, offering a view of the entire room without being easily noticed. Chika gestured for Ao to sit. You've made it this far, Ao. Now let's talk business. Ao sat down, his mind still reeling from the events that had brought him here. His eyes scanned the room again, observing the high-end fashion, the glint of jewelry, and the whispers floating through the air. He couldn't help but feel both excited and wary at the same time. Lagos, he realized, was a city full of opportunity, but also one that demanded a price. Chika slid a brandy glass toward him. Take a drink. You'll need it. Ao hesitated for a moment but took the glass, swirling it between his fingers. "What is this place really about?" he asked, his voice low. Chica smiled, her eyes gleaming with the intensity of someone who had seen it all. "You're in the inner circle, Ao. This is where the real deals happen. Where the influence of Lagos is wielded, quietly and powerfully. The city outside is just the surface, the nightlife, the parties, the business deals. But down here? Down here, it's all about control, power, and secrets." Ao felt the weight of her words sink in. This wasn't a place for the faint of heart. This was for people who were willing to do whatever it took to succeed. As the night wore on, more people entered the booth, figures cloaked in expensive suits and designer dresses. Some were business tycoons, others were artists, tech moguls, and even a few faces Ao recognized from Lagos nightlife, the socialites who seemed to be everywhere, moving between high-end events like they were born to live in luxury. But something in their eyes told Ao that these were not the happy-go-lucky partygoers he was used to seeing in clubs and lounges. No, these people carried a different energy, intensity, focus, and a hunger for more. They were ambitious in a way that Ao had never fully understood. Chica leaned in close, her voice low but clear. "You want to rise in Lagos, Ao? You want to build something more than just a tech startup? Then you need to understand that it's not enough to be talented. It's not enough to be smart. You need to play the game. You need to make connections that others can't." Ao blinked. "What game?" "The game of Lagos power," she replied, her tone sharp. "It's not just about what you know, Ao. It's about who you know, and what you're willing to do to get there." The weight of her words pressed down on him. Lagos was a city of extremes, he knew that much. The luxury of the wealthy and the grit of the underprivileged, side by side. But the idea of playing some kind of game, where rules didn't apply the way they did in the world he had known, was unsettling. "Are you saying I have to compromise?" Ao asked, feeling his gut churn. "No," Chica answered, her eyes narrowing. "I'm saying you have to adapt. What you do with that power is up to you, but in Lagos, you don't survive without understanding the rules. The city will swallow you whole if you don't." Ao could feel the tension building. He had always been driven, had always believed that honesty and integrity were the keys to success. But in a city as complex as Lagos, was that really enough? The silence between them was broken by the sudden opening of the booth door. A tall, well-dressed man entered, followed by two others. The man had the unmistakable air of someone who owned Lagos, a powerful figure, someone who seemed untouchable. Chica stood up immediately, her face showing the kind of respect that Ao hadn't seen from her before. "This is Akin Alyamide, the man who owns more of Lagos than most people ever realize." Ao stood up too, his heart pounding. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The opportunity to meet someone who could change everything for him. Akin Alyamide extended a hand toward Ao, his grip firm and calculating. "I've been hearing good things about you, Ao," he said, his voice smooth but commanding. "You're ambitious. That's what we like in Lagos." Ao didn't know what to say. He had heard of Akin Alyamide, the real estate mogul, the mastermind behind some of the biggest developments in Lagos. But to meet him in person, in a place like this, was an entirely different experience. "I hear you have a proposal for us, Ao," Akin continued, sitting down at the table and signaling for a drink. "I'm interested in hearing it." The conversation turned quickly to business. Ao explained his latest startup idea, a tech-based logistics platform that promised to revolutionize how goods moved through Lagos' chaotic streets. It was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious for the average investor, but Ao knew this was the type of thing that could catch Akin Alyamide's attention. But as the conversation wore on, Ao couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else beneath the surface. Akin was asking too many questions, too many personal questions. He wasn't just interested in Ao's business plan. He was interested in Ao himself. Finally, after what felt like hours of back and forth, Akin leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold and calculating. "You've got guts, Ao. But you need to understand something. In Lagos, nothing comes for free. You've got your business idea. But what will you do for me?" Ao froze. He knew what Akin was getting at. This wasn't just about business. This was about power, and Akin was asking him to make a choice. What do you want? Ao asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Akin smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who knew he had control. I want to see if you're willing to play the game. If you want to make it in Lagos, you need to prove you're one of us. And to do that, you'll need to make certain connections. Chika watched them silently from the side. Her expression was unreadable, but Ao could tell she was watching him closely. She had brought him here, but now it was up to him. Ao's mind raced. This was the choice of a lifetime, the kind of choice that could make or break him. But as he glanced around the room at the men and women who controlled Lagos' wealth and power, he realized something. This was Lagos. To succeed here, he would have to leave behind everything he knew and embrace the unpredictability, the uncertainty, and the danger that came with it. Ao took a deep breath. He had come this far. He could either walk away from this opportunity, return to his small startup, and live a quiet life, or he could make the choice to dive headfirst into the world of Lagos power. This was his moment. I'm in, Ao said finally, his voice steady. Akin Alyamide smiled again. Good. Welcome to the game. Chika's eyes glinted with approval. I knew you had it in you, Ao. And just like that, Ao had crossed the threshold. He had entered the world of secrets, where the rules were written by the powerful, and the price of success was always steep. But in Lagos, the game was always changing, and the only way to survive was to keep up with the rhythm. The next few days felt like a blur. Ao tried to maintain his routine of working on his tech startup, keeping up with meetings, checking emails, and trying to stay connected with the small but passionate team he had built. But his mind kept drifting back to that night, the night he crossed into a world he didn't fully understand, where power and wealth were the driving forces of every decision. Despite the uncertainty and the unsettling feeling that had settled in his stomach, Ao felt a pull. There was a hunger inside him now, a thirst for something bigger. He could no longer ignore it. Lagos was calling to him. The glittering lights of the city, the power dynamics, the elite circles. It was like an unspoken promise. A promise that if he played by their rules, he could become one of them. But at what cost? It was a week later when Ao received the next cryptic message from Chika. This time, it wasn't a text. It was an encrypted email, and it read, "The meeting is tonight. It's time to see if you can really handle the pressure. Come to Nigerian National Theatre, 10 p.m. sharp." The National Theatre wasn't exactly the place you'd expect a high-stakes meeting to take place. It was a grand, iconic structure in the heart of Lagos, its tall, sweeping roof shaped like an African drum, dominating the skyline. It was a place where history had been made, where arts and culture intertwined with politics, but not usually where you'd find business deals of the magnitude that Ao was beginning to dabble in. The night air was thick with the hum of Lagos, the city never truly sleeping. Ao could hear the sounds of distant street hawkers, the buzz of conversation from nearby cafes, and the steady flow of traffic. He found himself driving through the usual gridlock, his thoughts racing. He arrived at the National Theatre a little after 10 p.m. The iconic building loomed ahead, its giant pillars and curved exterior casting long shadows over the street. As Ao approached, he noticed something strange. There were no crowds. No tourists, no art lovers, just a few cars parked around the perimeter. Chika was waiting near the entrance, her silhouette framed by the theater's grand columns. "You came, Ao?" She smiled, but this time, there was something different about her smile, more calculating, almost like she knew something he didn't. "What's this all about?" Ao asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. "I thought we were supposed to meet in a private space." Chika's expression softened just a little. "The National Theatre is a symbol of power, Ao. Culture, history, and politics are woven into the fabric of Lagos here. And tonight, you're going to learn how all these elements come together." She led him inside. The familiar scent of freshly mopped floors and old wood filled the air, but the place seemed oddly deserted, save for a few security guards keeping watch. They walked into a large auditorium that was eerily quiet. The stage was empty, save for a few chairs set up in a circle. The lights above flickered as Chika gestured for Ao to sit. He hesitated, but then took a seat at the far edge. Akin al-Yamid entered shortly after, flanked by a group of quietly observant individuals, all of whom exuded the same air of power that Akin had. They were dressed sharply in dark suits, their eyes scanning the room like hawks, taking in every detail. Ao recognized some of their faces from previous events, people who were legends in Lagos business circles, known for their connections, wealth, and influence. Chica stood beside him, her face expressionless. This is it though. The next step. The real test. Akin raised a hand, and the room immediately fell silent. He looked at Ao with an approving smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Ao, he began, his deep voice smooth and commanding, you've proven you have ambition. But in Lagos, ambition alone doesn't get you far. Tonight, you will prove whether you have the stamina to handle what lies ahead. Ao swallowed hard. He didn't fully understand what was going on, but he knew it had something to do with the game, the unspoken rules that governed Lagos elite. His mind raced as Akin continued. In Lagos, loyalty is currency. You can rise fast, but you can fall just as quickly if you pick the wrong side. And right now, there's a choice in front of you. A choice that will decide where your future lies. He paused, looking around the room. The people sitting there were waiting for Ao's response. You've seen the power of Lagos. You've seen the secrets. Now it's time for you to choose whether you'll be a player or a pawn. Ao's mind raced. Loyalty. These were words that felt heavy in this room. Every person here, every business magnate, every player in Lagos elite circles, had made a decision to stand with one group or another. And now, Ao was expected to choose. But who would he choose? Chica leaned in slightly, her voice a whisper. The decision is yours, Ao. Akin is asking you to join his circle. To be part of the family that holds Lagos in their hands. Akin's gaze locked with Ao's. Join us and you'll have access to more than you ever imagined. There are no limits in this city. But you have to decide, will you play the game by our rules, or will you go back to being a small player in a big city? Ao's heart raced. His pulse quickened as he glanced at the others in the room. They were all waiting for him to speak, to make the choice that would define the rest of his life. He could feel the pressure mounting. This was his chance to step into a world that many only dreamed of. But was he willing to pay the price? Ao took a deep breath. He had spent his whole life working hard, making small sacrifices, trying to prove he could rise. And now, the door to greater power had opened, but it came with a cost. What was the price? Ao's fingers tightened around the armrest of his chair as he turned to Chica. She didn't give him a reassuring smile this time. Her eyes were intense, expectant. He knew the choice was his. Akin's voice cut through the silence again. We all have our price, Ao. The question is, are you willing to pay it? Ao felt his heart pounding in his chest as he stood, the room watching him expectantly. He looked at Akin al-Yamid and then at the others in the circle. They were waiting for his answer. In that moment, Ao knew there was no going back. He had come too far, and his ambition burned too brightly for him to turn around now. With a steady breath, he finally spoke. I'm in. Akin's smile grew wider, and Chica's expression softened. Good. Welcome to the family, Ao. As Ao left the National Theater, the weight of the decision settled over him. The game had begun. He was officially part of the world of secrets, of power, and of ambition. But as he stepped out into the cool night air, the familiar sound of Lagos rushing around him, he realized something deeper. In Lagos, every choice led to another, and every path he took from here would come with its own set of consequences. Was he ready for what lay ahead? Ao wasn't sure. But one thing was certain, he wasn't just a player in the game anymore. He was now a part of the game. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell for newly created content.